My name's Mikey Dickerson. There are 3 important facts about me right now. I used to work at Google. Right now I work for President Obama, and I also have a little bit of a cold, so I apologize for the sniffling. I'm going to do the best I can. Have any of you here heard the HealthCare.gov story before? Few. All right, we're getting there. We got like 5 or 10% of the hands up. I feel like I've been telling it over and over and over for 2 years now. So I'll give you a very short version for the 95% of you that didn't raise your hand right now. October 2013, I was minding my own business. I was working at Google in Mountain View here in California. As in the first reel of any good disaster movie, there was playing on the TV in the background a whole bunch of endless cable news coverage of this thing called HealthCare.gov that apparently wasn't working out super well. I wasn't paying a lot more attention to it than anybody else at the time. Well, there were people paying a lot of attention to it. I wasn't paying a particularly large amount of attention to it at the time. I got a phone call mid-October from somebody I didn't know that I've come to know very well. His name was Todd Park. He's a CTO. He works for the president, who asked if I wouldn't consider coming out to maybe take a look at this thing. They could use some help. Not really sure what's going on. It's not, as you can see on the TV, it's not going super well. If this were the movie version, we would have probably been loaded onto black helicopters at this point. At the very this whole sequence was very cinematic. Like, we would have been put on the black helicopters at NASA Ames and flown to Washington, D.C. In real life, you get to buy your own crappy middle seat on a United flight to Dulles. We landed there, got introduced to a cast of colorful characters, got put in a Secret Service van, and basically told the Health and Human Services headquarters is over on that side of town. The agency that runs this website is up in Baltimore. There's a big contractor office out in Herndon, Virginia. Have fun storming the castle. That's more or less the instructions. So we went at that. That 3-day investment became a 3-week. So we made a little report, and then we got asked to stay and implement the recommendations of the report. That turned into a 3-week commitment. Of course, at the end of the 3 weeks, we weren't quite done. So long story short, I went home in January. This is a sequence called commitment escalation. It's the same way they sell you a car that's way bigger than you actually need. This is your one warning that you will get that we will do it to you if you make the questionable life decision of taking us up on our call to action at the end here. The cruelty of this whole situation was that how it turned into a 3-month thing was that the thing we were trying to do, which is get this website to work well enough to salvage the open enrollment period for 2013, which was the first chance millions of people had to get access to the healthcare system, was almost but not quite entirely impossible. The things that we pushed on did move. There was just so many things to push on and so much time and so little time to do it in. So for the period that I billed as a consultant during this time, the invoice I submitted for a 9-week period had an average number of hours worked per day of 17.5, including through the weekends, no days off, anything like that. It was the hardest thing I have ever done, and it was the worst thing I have ever done. It was also the best thing I have ever done. I hope it's obvious how all those fit together. So we went back from that. That ended. I went home, tried to make sense of what had just happened, and unbeknownst to me, but knownst to other people in Washington, this played right into the hands of people that had been, so Todd Park among them, also Jen Palka, a former deputy CTO of Todd's and the founder of Code for America, if you're familiar with them, Haley Van Dyke, who's been in the government since the beginning of the administration. They had been working already to create something that they were thinking along the lines of what the UK government had done. They created a government digital service, ironically, after their government healthcare IT program didn't go super well in 2010 for them. And this played right into their hands and added a lot of urgency and attention to reform efforts that were already underway. So this takes us to August 2014, when, after months of intense discussions, I was eventually persuaded to leave my comfortable job forever and go work for the White House to start this thing now called U.S. Digital Service. on literally the first day of that job, August 11th, 2014, I had press conferences starting at 12 p.m., at which people asked me questions such as the following. What is this going to be in 3 to 5 years? Like, what is your strategic plan? Like, how is this going to make sense? What are you doing to institutionalize the U.S. Digital Service? How are you going to make sure that it doesn't all go away with the next administration on the first day? And my answer to these questions was kind of, I don't know. Like, our first year, we're going to try to find some big problems and work on them and not suck it up. Like, that's kind of that's kind of my strategic plan. Thank you. I guess that struck a nerve. But that was the extent of the plan. August 2014. Ask me again in a year was basically it. Well, it's been a year. We've done a decent number of things. We have, first of all, the second enrollment period for HealthCare.gov was not in the news. That's an accomplishment. It's a hard one to talk about because it's like, well, we didn't ruin it. That was good. We've taken some important. We've done a lot of work on immigration, and we've taken some of the important processes, really high volume processes, like the replacement of your green card, which is a paper-based thing, took several months, is now an online process that runs a lot better. We have been involved with Recreation.gov that's going under a overhaul. It's being recontracted out. We helped make sure that the RFP was written in a way that there would be we'd be asking for an API and open access for people to build on top of as a platform instead of just another monolith, the way that we tend to do things. We were involved with the NHTSA, National, these are government words that I wouldn't have known a year ago, National Highway Transportation Safety Authority, the place where you look up your car recalls. There have been some really high-profile car recalls in the last year, and we helped make sure that that stood up to the load as best we could. We were involved in the Ebola response last summer. We have some things coming out this fall that I'm very excited about, which are in the line of education policy, and there's other stuff that I never ever would have thought we'd get mixed up in that I can't talk about right now that we did. You can just trust me on this. Anything that's been in the news where the good old U.S. of A. has had a big problem that has technology as a component in the last year or so, we have been there. So it's been very exciting and exhausting. And I feel like we have done reasonably well for ourselves and not sucked. So strategic objective 1, going okay. Now, it's been a year. I don't have the excuse of it's just my first day anymore. And with the experience we have gained through all these things, I feel like there is something resembling a strategy which I can actually put words to, and I thought I would explain to you today. We haven't done this before. This is new content, so if I screw it up, that's why. Also, I have a cold, FYI. The strategy looks something like this. Here is the state of the world today. The most recent numbers I know of, the federal government in the United States spends $84 billion a year on what they call information technology, IT. That is just the top line. That is just the money that is actually classified as IT spending. There's a lot of other stuff, which they call shadow IT, which is out there. So assume $84 billion is a conservative lower bound of how much of your tax money we are spending on technology. There is a report, pretty well known by the Standish Group, which makes the claim that of this $84 billion in investment that we do every year, 94% of those projects fail. They are significantly over budget or significantly behind schedule, or in a large number of cases, never actually deliver any value to the end user at all. Not super great. Oh yeah, that was the thing I was going to put in here. Also, keep in mind that a huge amount of that $84 billion goes to licensing expensive enterprise software. Enterprise is still a thing in the government. You have to set your time machine to about 1985 to understand most of the vocabulary. So this is the state of affairs. The unfortunate thing is that this is a stable equilibrium. If you perturb it just a little bit, it will go back to the way it was. Many of you will have seen this. If you take a really good developer and try to drop them into a team of very mediocre developers, what happens? This isn't really a question-answer format, I realize. I could hear a little bit. So I'll just tell you, one of two things happens. The really good person can't take it and leaves very quickly thereafter, or they go native and pretty soon they have conformed to the status quo and they're like everyone else. This is just like that. If you are a small company, a very capable small company with the best of intentions, doing a good job, and there were more than 50 contracts assigned for different parts of HealthCare.gov, to use my favorite example. Some of them were entirely capable companies that we think highly of, and they all nearly went down with the same ship because it was part of the same integrated project. So this is what I mean by it's stable. It won't change if you touch it just a little bit, push just a little bit on it. So evolution naturally is probably not going to change this equilibrium for us. Now, revolution is also probably not practical. Here's the thing. I can't actually disrupt Social Security in the way that you might feel like it's okay for Uber to disrupt the taxi cab industry. You might. I guess that's actually a little controversial in Portland here, so sorry. But I can't disrupt the Department of Defense's ability to fight wars. They would not appreciate it, and ultimately neither would you. So that's also off the table. So what can you do? Well, we can tilt the entire pinball machine by hacking the incentives in the system that has built things to be this way, a process of directed evolution, if you will. And the U.S. Digital Service is the tool we have right now that is designed to do exactly that. It's not big. It's very small. It has a very disproportionate influence to its size. I haven't even seen it yet, but somebody texted me last night and said that the president was on Daily Show a couple days ago, which I did know, and apparently talked about us. What do you know? So that's exciting. That's a thing that you probably wouldn't have expected. I wouldn't have expected the president to be doing. That's what I mean by we have influence disproportionate to our size. What we need to apply that directed evolution towards is I believe there is a possible different stable equilibrium from where we are right now, which looks something like this. There needs to be a small number of very capable top talent from the U.S. tech industry in the government, on the government payroll, beholden to nobody except for the public interest and keeping the ultimate end-user goal in mind, to direct and be the rudder on that $84+ billion of spending that is going out into the ecosystem. If we establish that, and we do some other changes that I'll talk about really quick, to make that ecosystem more competitive, to introduce meaningful competition into the way those contracts are awarded and to introduce some accountability into the whole scenario, we can get to a better place, which can then also sustain itself, where the incentives actually align and things make more sense. A lot depends on that core of people living inside the government, bringing some accountability both to the government agency, which tends to think only about its own needs, and to the contracting community, so that we, the taxpayer, are no longer in the position of having to ask the used car dealer what kind of car we should buy, which is, in the best case, there's a little bit of a mismatch of incentives there, and that's kind of where we're trapped right now. We can get out of that. I mentioned the U.S. Digital Service is a tool for doing that. There's a bunch of work which is underway, which we don't talk about a bunch because it's hard to make into a good story, unlike the HealthCare.gov thing. There's a thing called Gsa Schedule 70, and I promise this is as governmenty as I will get in this talk. It is a really large contract vehicle which is made to make it easy for government agencies to hire companies which have been pre-qualified onto that schedule. It's been around a really long time. The names that are on that schedule traditionally are names that you would be able to guess if you went and traced where that $80 billion are going. We are revising and updating that schedule right now, and related schedules. We're doing that in a different way, where the people that are being evaluated for that schedule are being asked to submit a prototype and show us something you can do instead of tell us what you can do, because we have learned the hard way that anybody can read online the Agile Manifesto and paste that into a document and say this is what we are going to do. It doesn't mean that they're actually able to do it. That schedule is changing. There's a contracting challenge and process I'm going to skip because we're trying to save a couple minutes here. We are training government contracting officers in more modern methods so that we don't continue to hear things like we can't do an agile contract because it's against the law. It's not against the law. It's just not the way we're used to doing things, which is a difference that comes up a whole lot in government. You'll get very used to that. Now, another important component to that, the President has committed to, by the end of calendar year 2015, releasing a revised open source policy. What will that policy contain? I don't know. It's not entirely up to me. There is a whole sausage-making process that we have to go through. I will tell you a few things that I would like it to contain. Number one, I would like it to be the case that every time the government pays by the hour to take on all of the development risk of developing bespoke code, that we own that code when we are done. That's not always the case today. Point two, I would like everything the government owns to be released as open source to the rest of the public. That's maybe a cheap applause line with this audience, I know, but those I'm very careful to say those two things differently because it gets a lot of people defensive and confused if I say things like we should buy everything and then make it free to everybody. That sounds like crazy communism. But if I say those two things separately, it goes down better. One, we should not pay for development of things that we don't own when we're done. That just seems like a crazy waste of your taxpayer money. And two, we should take everything we own and give it away. It's actually a fact right now that any work product I produce while I'm being paid by your taxes as a federal employee is in the public domain. That's the truth. So if you want to make a T-shirt with the logo's not on the screen right now, but if you want to make a T-shirt with the logo, you can do that. And I couldn't stop you even if I wanted to, which I wouldn't. So we just need to take those principles that are already there, make them a little better supported. Another point that we'd like the open source policy to have is that when we're doing a contract award, there's a thing called the alternatives analysis. That alternatives analysis should require every time that you explain why you did or did not select the closest open source alternative to the thing that you did select. There will be times that we will continue to buy commercial software, and nobody's trying to force that out of existence, but we can at least make sure that the open alternatives have got a place at the table. And then the last thing, this is getting a little bit crazier. Imagine if we had a bug bounty type program, or if we just paid for audits of existing open source tools that everybody depends on already. Heartbleed in the last year was a bit of a challenge to a lot of long-standing assumptions we've had about open source. That was a shallow bug, and there was plenty of eyes that could have caught it. None of them did. It's a classic tragedy of the commons kind of problem, and there are ways we could solve it. If we could take just one of those billions of dollars, just 1 billion, which nobody's going to miss, imagine how much good it could do on the scale of open source stuff. So this is why I'm telling you, there are fantastic opportunities for you on both sides of the equation I just described. If you're a person who performs well under pressure, if 5 p.m. Friday Situation Room meetings sound like the kind of insanity that you'd like to experience once in your life, then apply to U.S. Digital Service. You can find us online. If you are a person who's more of a builder who wants to construct over the longer term, look up a thing called 18F. It's a team housed out of the General Services Administration, or figure out how to compete to get onto that schedule to do business with the government. That $84 billion, you may know this or you may not, but that's about twice as much as all of the money that was invested by the U.S. venture capital industry in 2014. That's how much money there is out there. We got a lot of it. Come get some. I got... The stakes for all this, by the way, could not be higher. I get self-conscious talking about it because it sounds so crazy. It can't be true, but there are literally millions of disabled veterans, millions of people who need access to the healthcare system who haven't had it before, millions of people who are the first in their family to go to college and could use some help figuring out what financial aid is available and what is a good investment of that money. Lots of people like this they need your help. So, if you're willing to spend just a little bit of your life's energy serving those populations, and you'd like to do it in a way that takes advantage of your particular skills and talents and doesn't require you to carry a gun, then please consider these things. Thank you very much.